What if those thoughts you have in your head are actually not yours? What if they are just a wiring from your past memories and past experience? Today, we are going to talk about how you can transform your thoughts and self doubt, fear into your own personal power to transform your life. This is not just a quick fix thing where you say, okay, do this and do that. It's going to transform your life. No, we are going to go through a step by step process at which you can use to transform your old wiring that are no longer helping you into a personal power that you can use to transform your life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Proverbial Mind podcast. It is your host again, Samuel, and here with me is David. David is a coach, is a leadership coach, and a great person who I've gotten to know, and he has shared a lot of great stories about this particular topic of turning your pain, your fears, and everything into your personal power. So, David, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself?
Sure, sure. What an intro. Thank you so much. Yeah, I am a life coach, a mindset coach, and I specialize in neuroplasticity of being able to create new thoughts within our mind and create those pathways in the brain to be able to take corrective action to fix what
Right.
you don't like in your life and what you want to change. I came from it personally of I learned about neuroscience, psychology, and epigenetics through tons of study, and I didn't actually study for it to become a doctor or any of that. And it was due to my family's breakup of my dad had manic depression, and I eagerly wanted to know why in his brain he made the choices that he made that had an effect on our family.
Wow. Wow, that is a great story. I love to hear when these topics come from someone who have personal experience because it doesn't come from a textbook kind of explanation anymore, but it comes from a personal touch, a personal feel that gives you reality explanation from a place of someone who has been through it and has done it before and has the right answers and be able to connect to the audience. So I'm going to start with this one question.
Mhm.
So now I remember the last time we spoke and you talked about the power of the mind and, wiring the mind and everything. So what power does our mind have in influencing these issues that we have with our old patterns and old wiring?
Sure. So think about everything that you do, everything, and how much of it is probably automated, which
Mm,
sounds like a computer AI type word, but just think about what you're doing automated every day within your body. Our brain has a side that's called the default mode network, the
mm,
DMN. And essentially, that's what we do when our body, essentially, the way I'd say it is, has enough muscle memory that it's kind of running on autopilot. And you hear a song that comes on that you love that song. You heard that in school when you were growing up, and then before you know it, the song's over. And when you know that song's 2.5 to 3 minutes and it felt like 10 seconds before that ended because of that good feeling you were feeling, that's that effect that you can have for positive. It works in so many different ways of if you focus on the positive and songs and feelings and things like that, emotions have those poles that it brings you back to another time that when you're feeling. So that really has the positive effect on it. But a lot of people are living in the negative effect, and when I say automated, I'm talking about you go to sleep on the same side of the bed. You wake up and then you have your morning routine. And before you went to bed, maybe you were looking at your phone. You shut off your phone and plugged it in right before you went to sleep. Go to sleep, wake up when your alarm comes on. You look at your phone, scroll for a little bit, get up, brush your teeth. You just have that same routine over and over. And the more I talk to
right.
people, everyone's like, they have their own specific thing. And where that is, and where I think we're doing a lot of it negatively without really thinking or putting thought into it is before we go to sleep and when we first wake up. First 10 minutes and last 10 minutes is what I like to call these two. Your brain is in the most theta that it's going to be compared when you're conscious compared to when you're sleeping. That's usually when you get into theta states. And that's when you're like, you're conscious in there dreaming, having like all those kind of feelings. And when you're in that theta state, you're very suggestible. A lot of psychologists like to say that it's like you could talk to your subconscious. And that's the reasoning behind when they say when you first wake up, don't look at your phone, go to the mirror and say your affirmations.
Mm,
Because you're in that theta state, you're letting your body know, giving positive self-talk, you're starting the day off right and priming your brain that this is going to be a positive day. Whereas most people, instead of going to the mirror, saying that affirmation or anything that's going to trigger that positive effect, they go to their phone where they know that that's where their problems are and that's where their
mm,
anxieties are and what's going to happen throughout that day. And when you get stuck into that mode, that's why I say I don't think we're even conscious or people aren't conscious that they're even doing it. That I always tell people if you have 20 minutes, you can change your life. First 10, last 10. That's all you do. And go no phone those last 10. Scroll all you want, but then give yourself 10 minutes before you let yourself start falling asleep. And go through journal while you're doing that. Go through those positive affirmations, walk through what you want tomorrow. Say you have a big meeting at work coming tomorrow and you're really nervous because you need to perform, it needs to go well. The best way to do is those last 10 is close your eyes, focus on the meeting of everyone kind of being around you, and focus on how confident you are and how everyone is receptive to your ideas and how much energy you're going to have and be able to portray. You're priming your brain for the next day to expect that to happen. And why I love using this, and it's an example that I think will translate to so many more people, is I'm a big sports fan. And I became almost obsessed when I saw the best of the best athletes. And these are I'm talking about the Michael Jordan, Michael
right.
Phelps, Cristiano Ronaldo, like people who are the greatest of the greatest. And I use the Cristiano Ronaldo example. He has so many amazing goals, a credited career between him and Messi, current day, people say these are the greatest who've ever played. And there's a penalty, or sorry, not penalty, free kick that Ronaldo's taking. And before he takes it and he scores this incredible goal, and that's what people remember is him scoring this incredible
Right.
goal. But there's this cool highlight right right before he takes it that you're watching the preparation and you see him take a couple deep breaths. And
Mm,
then he says something along the fact, and this is kind of how it's been like interpreted or put through, is you can do this. You've always done this. This is routine for you. And he's priming his brain that before he kicks that, this is like on the playground when you do it every day and you do it 100 times in a row and you have no problem doing it. Now you have the pressure and the fans and your team all around you with these expectations. And what he's trying to do is bring his brain back to a calm base level of this is just what I do every day. Let me just get into it. No heightened emotion, no nothing else. How can I be as calm as I need to be when I need to perform the best? And it's the science behind that is when we're calm, our eyes can see the entire room. When we're stressed, we get laser vision. And there's stuff around us that is right in our way that could be helping us, could be God trying to send us something or the universe trying to
right.
give us a message of what we're doing. And we don't see it because we're so hyper focused on the fear, the anxiety, or whatever that's going on.
You are right. I remember a time when I was standing on the stage in front of about 3,000 people, and I was going to give a speech that day. And before I went to the stage, I had everything right. I had the confidence that it was all going to go well. And while I stood at the stage and I look at the big crowd, I mean, that's a lot of people.
Mhm.
And I had that spot stage light shining on my face. And then here was I in the center of a stadium, trying to give a speech to 3,000 people about my story, and some of which were very funny. Then this mindset, these thoughts, some of these thoughts start coming in, and it wants to cripple you with fear. It wants to make you feel like, oh, you're not gonna sound good, or this negative thoughts and sayings want to start kicking into my head, and I could feel
Mhm.
myself beginning to shrink inside. I was getting afraid, and then another voice just came out and say, heck, what's gonna happen? It's not the first time you speaking on the stage. You're trying to inspire people here. Just don't keep quiet. Just keep speaking and stay calm. And it's not the first time. I just, stop focusing on myself and I
Mhm.
focused on the people that I was trying to inspire, the people I was trying to talk to. I was trying
Yeah.
to change people's life with this message. It's not about me. So I took my focus away from me and I spoke to myself inside that this is about the people you're trying to talk to. You're trying to pass a positive message. And immediately I felt calm inside.
Mm,
And the moment I felt calm, I had clarity in my head. And I began to just speak freely. In fact, I started the conversation, this speech, with a joke that everyone burst into laughter, And I had let that other thought kick in, I probably would have frozen for a couple of minutes on that stage, and that would have been so very embarrassing. So
mm,
you are right to say that the mind does indeed have power to wire your mind. I mean, I've remembered times when I have had certain thoughts before going to bed, and then sometimes I dream of those things. I
mm,
dream of those things. And sometimes
mhm,
those dreams are probably not good. I find myself feeling like crap, in the morning and almost the whole day. But then I do realize that whenever I read book before going to bed, if it's something positive, and before going to bed, maybe I just think of something I'm grateful for. I think of something positive before going to bed. I realize I tend to sleep better. And I
mm.
tend to have better dreams, except for maybe other visions, but you wake up and then you feel better. On the aspect
Yeah.
of the automatic action of always want to pick your phone when you get up, I everyone gets into that habit. I have to remind
Mhm.
myself every time that no, 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 don't pick that phone. That's not what you're supposed to do now. You're supposed to pray or do
Yeah.
something else. But that phone. So you're very right. You're very, very right about that. And my next question here is,
Mhm.
how does neuroscience explain why negative thought loops are so hard to break? Now, we've talked about the mindset,
Mhm.
and I've spoken about how me myself on that stage had these
Yeah.
negative thoughts coming to me. And sometimes, those bad habits of waking up and want to just pick up your phone. As you also affirm to it sometimes that it's almost automatic because we don't think
Mhm.
about it. So how does neuroscience explain this stuff? How does it happen? They usually say before you can solve a problem, you already solve 50% by understanding the root. So
Yeah. So there's no clear answer for that 100%, but this is my theory of where it is. It's attention span.
right.
Is if we look at just what happened around COVID when that happened to now, the studies show that it's like I think it's like 5 seconds less. I think it was the average attention span if you were watching something that popped up on your phone or watching on
Mm-hmm.
TV was around 17 seconds. And it got down from like 21 seconds to 17 seconds over 10 to 15 years, like a long gap of time. And then COVID happened. And within, I think it was 2.5 years, it went from, or 2 years, it went from 17 seconds in that ballpark to 12 seconds. So there's this steep drop more than what had happened the previous 15 years over a short little span. And when you think about COVID, we were stuck in our homes, couldn't do anything, and our dopamine essentially turned into binging a TV show or being on our
Right.
phone and social media. So the attention span, as it gets shorter, is the quicker that you're going to want to quick reach for that dopamine. And what's the easiest way to hit dopamine? You can have it when you're around people and like feeling good or something's happening for you, but it's really easy when it's always right in your phone.
Oh,
So when
right.
you're
No
when
barrier
you're
of entry.
always yeah, so when you're always depending on that, and that goes inside with what we were just talking about as well, of the way your thoughts can run then is think about when you open up, say you're on Instagram or at whatever your favorite social media app is, and you hit the search function and you see your algorithm of what videos are that are
Mm.
good for you, typically what you're liking and what you're going through. Your thoughts are your own algorithm in your head of what you're processing throughout the day. So if it's a lot of negative, it's going to be like negative stuff most likely coming up on your social media as well. So you start feeding yourself the answer is similar to what you were going through before, is the more you focus on it and say, I know I need to do this more, the more you act on that impulse of, okay, and I'm big on the phone of doesn't mean you need to cut it out completely, but start with like
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes a day of, I used my phone this much this last week, and you've got your screen activity you could check in your settings.
Right.
Try to add 5 minutes or 10 minutes per day, per week, whatever works at your schedule, and do a little bit more of just being mindful. And I had a mentor challenge me because I'm someone who I like to think on my feet. I wanted to be a lawyer growing up, so I naturally like to talk and like to give and take. And he had challenged me about how much negative thoughts I had going on in my head. And he knew I was ADHD and I'm an overthinker, so that was kind of like in the ballpark too. But he wanted to like kind of get to the root of this for me. And he went on and asked me to go through this elaborate exercise of I would write down every time I had a neutral or negative thought, something that wasn't happy or that didn't light me and make me feel excited and alive. So I was just like, oh, this won't be bad. I thought it would be maybe like 5, 10 times in a day or
Hmm.
something like that, like something inconsequential. In the first 5 minutes, there was like 15 things. And it was like you write it, I had to write it 3 times each time something happened. So man, like I was going through all this and then I'm just like, what is going on? And it hit about after 2 hours, I was like, dude, I can't keep going. This is just, it was too much on me because it was so much that I was writing. My hand was cramping. I'm like, what is, I never thought that where it was, but I need to recognize that even though I considered myself a positive person, I think anyone who had talked to me would say more positive things than negative things if you met everyone who has ever met me.
Right.
And I had a very negative cycle of thinking constantly looping in my head. And I look at my life now and where I'm at, and I feel so fortunate because I found this out at in my late 30s. Part of me feels dumb that I didn't figure this out in my 20s and I wish I had more time, but I look at it as like, man, I talk to other people in other walks of life, and some people don't figure this out until their 70s or their 80s. So I was like, you
Right.
know what? I've got 42 years on those people. Like I've got a head start. So I wanted to start doing shows like this and kind of getting this out there because I was like, you know what? The more I can talk to people, maybe people can get a couple more years of knowing how this goes and
Right.
focusing on the positive and just little bits at a time. I'm not saying you go from whatever you're living in your current life and just be ridiculously happy all the time. It's not realistic. You go slow and you work in little things and find ways to, when you react negatively to something, write it down. Don't do the 3 times I was talking about. Don't want to annoy yourself, but write it down and just like make it a thing of, do I want to react to that? What made me react? Why does that have power over me that I'm reacting like that? And whenever we have a trigger or an angry emotion, it's something that's coming out of us, and it's usually something that bothers us about ourselves. That's just psychology 101 of how that a lot of that works. So the
Right.
more you dig into that of why I reacted to something, you could just tap into a whole other level of what your positive thoughts are to your negative thoughts, label them, and focus on the positive over the negative.
What I just captured there now is that, first of all, the mind always crave dopamine. And this dopamine is this feel good, comfort, basically, excitement. Your body, your brain always want to be at a state of excitement, a state of comfort, at a state of this adrenaline rush, that feel good sense. And
Mhm.
it's very easy to find that in your phone because you wake up in the morning, the first thing the brain wants is that adrenaline rush. It doesn't want the quietness, the stillness of the soul. It just wants to get all pumped up and happy. And sometimes when you do this habit, it's then you find negative things. For example, you could open on your phone, and the news does a very good job at feeding us with those kind of stuffs sometimes. Or
Mhm.
you could see something that normally for you, maybe you have had an experience with that before, and then it triggers those cars and those negativity. And as time goes on, that begins to create that negative loop, that negative thinking in your head. So based on neuroscience, it all starts first, with that dopamine, that idea of feel good and always wanted to feel better. And then
Mhm.
from that, the next thing I found was the self-awareness, which was that is what made you know that I thought I was a very positive person. How come do I have all this negative thought? So how can someone listening to this now
Mhm.
who have negative thought process and negative patterns, we all know that sometimes these things are just, they're not real. They are just in your head. They threaten you, they make you feel like it's happening. And most times, like they always say, the brain cannot differentiate between thoughts and what is actually happening right now. And
Yeah.
these things trigger emotions and maybe some other neural links in your system. And as we
Yeah.
know, when you're constantly being in the space of fear, you can shorten your life like that because your blood is
Yeah.
always racing, you're always in this state of imbalance and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
how can we break this negative pattern? You've already stated one
Yeah.
way, which was, first of all, be aware of it.
Mhm.
If you're not aware, you don't even know you have the problem. So
Yeah.
what are the other ways?
Finding ways to naturally relax. And for me, it's meditating, praying, whatever works for people, working out, but finding that way that you can naturally relax. So much of us when you get caught up in these negative cycles, your cortisol levels just go skyrocketing. So
Right.
if you have any of the effects of you go to the bathroom a lot at night and or you wake up at random times in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep, you can't fall asleep when you first lay down, and it takes you a whole long time to actually like fall asleep, it's usually it's a cortisol level thing. And that's
Mm.
also time to your hair going gray or you losing your hair or going through all those negative things. When your cortisol spikes, and this is where epigenetics will come to play, you can get so stressed that it can essentially you're like think of your genes like an on off switch,
Mm.
that when they're on, your genes can access so much that of your potential, hidden potential, what you have in you, stuff you probably don't even imagine you could do, that you are only thinking you could never do it because you've been so stressed your entire life that all those gene centers are, and like I said, like a light switch, they're turned off. And the cool thing about it though is if you do switch to the positive, you can get those gene centers caught back up and turned back on. You've got to find the right happiness type of level, lower the cortisol. So it's not something like anybody is a lost cause. And I think a lot of us feel like that. And that's where lazy phrases come along. The whole you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Right.
Neuroplasticity proves that wrong. It's you're being stubborn and you don't want to change. If you say you can't, it's not a you can't thing. It's just you don't want to. You
Want
don't want
to.
to put in that effort and look into it. But yeah, the more you can dig into those things, you're really going to have that positive effect on where you need and where you can change that negative loop pattern and the cortisol levels spiking to a more normal level. And when you talk about cortisol with stress, I mean, you could talk. I had my mom passed away 11 years ago. And to this day, we don't know exactly why. It was cancer, but we don't know where the cancer came from. There's no family history. And it came to her, like, got to her all of a sudden out of nowhere. And the only thing that the doctor could say was stress, that it got to her that much. And my mom was the most positive, happy lady in the world. And she had
Mm.
a standing room only funeral where people lined out the door. She was one of the happiest people I've ever known. But I do know, based off what we went through as a family, she had high levels of stress. And why I bring up my mom as this example of talk to your parents, anyone who's listening to this, ask them if they were really stressed at any point when they were children or when they were pregnant or as like in the womb, and
Right.
just be have the honest like, did something happen? Anything major happen? Because that stress then can carry over. It's going from blood to blood at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of us are born with this stress, and that can turn to things like ADHD, other type of health issues that are caused in directly or indirectly from that stress. And the biggest thing to do it and to counteract that stress, and it's a long way to me answer your question and come back to where I started,
Yeah.
you got to get as calm as you can be and
Mm.
find ways that every day, for if it's an hour to 2 hours, like for me, it used to be I only had time to do an hour. And it was
Right.
like I only had time to meditate for that much or to like get into that mindset. But you end up hitting a switch because I say just start at 5 minutes a day and build it up and try to do 5 minutes more or 2 minutes more, a little bit more every day. I promise you, you're going to hit a level when you can hit that level of calm that you feel so good that you're like, I don't miss any of what I thought I was glued to or what I had to do.
Right.
A lot of it, we think we have to have things in our life. And no, it's just that our body is tricking us into that. It's having those negative loop patterns. It has that same effect then on your body, is that your body's also going to just kind of put you into random moods of blah, of I don't know what to do. I don't want to do. And it's when you can't focus, you just have to grab your phone because you can't actually focus on whatever situation or
Right.
conversation that's going on. It's usually correlated that you have high levels of stress and an attention span issue. And both of what we're saying here, you're prime examples of, man, if you can start thinking on the positive, you realize that you can kind of turn a lot of those negative thoughts on the positive thoughts, and you see the difference of how you feel, how you talk, and the confidence that you have behind you because you have energy and you're not being dragged down by that constant negative loop.
That is true. I have noticed many times, sometimes when I'm stressed, you're just all over the place and you really want to calm yourself. That is when that's when you think of your phone, because you kind of feel like maybe when you go around and press your phone and do something on that phone, it's going to calm you down. But guess what? It only accelerates the stress level. When you start seeing more things and then you scroll and scroll, you don't get you just don't get satisfied, and it doesn't necessarily tend to let go of that stress. that is something that is very, very common in today's society. And even with the phone being easily accessed, makes it very, very difficult to even try to find something else to do other than take that phone and start scrolling off and trying to release your stress. You
Yeah.
talked about cortisol level. For someone who is here now who has no idea what cortisol level is, what does it mean?
So it's your essentially your level of stress and anxiety that you deal with on a day to day.
Mm.
Do you ever get that hit in your stomach feeling like something's twisting when something potentially is big happening or going wrong? Do you have like the issues with sleeping that I was mentioning before? Focus issues of not being able to lock in. A lot of it is that you've been stressed to a certain level, and it's all different, going to be different for every person. But how much of a toll is that taken on you? Think about it of you have a battery of. I always like to say there's a difference between being physically tired and mentally tired.
Right.
And there are times I can do a 10-minute meditation. And prior to me doing that meditation, I feel like I need to sleep and I need to go to sleep for like 6 to 8 hours. And I do a 10-minute meditation. And I'm like, oh, I was just mentally drained.
Mm.
So think of it as each little level of stress is chipping away at your phone meter, and this is your battery or your energy in life. Every time you have something really stressful or something like that happen, and it doesn't come to any type of conclusion, whether it's essentially not a positive conclusion, if it's neutral or negative, it had some effect on you. And almost think of that 100% getting dinged down every time one of those things happened. So as that happens, that's what's going to be turning off the genes in your body. And we don't know if that's genes that you need to kind of get through certain things or be able to fight off certain diseases. And in some cases, those genes can be kind of deactivated or not working during that period. And that could be the right chemistry for someone to potentially get cancer or get something that really will be effective to them. So
Right.
I talk to people who are workaholics a lot. I try to help them find a way to find that same passion that they're getting, but they don't need to do it all the time at the high stress levels. Of there's this grind culture that comes off that grinding. If you work as hard as you can all the time, that you'll get to this better life. You might, but I've talked to a lot of these people, and I've coached people who are millionaires, tens of millions in
Mm.
their bank account, and they're miserable. All the money in the
Right.
world didn't change a thing, and it's
Mm-mm.
because those stress levels are still so high. They think they need to stress that much to generate the money that they're coming in. And in most cases, I say when you're making money or you're doing anything job related in an interview, who are you going to hire between these two people? So the grind culture is the stress culture. That's the
Right.
anxiety. You need to like pump through everything. So if you have someone who's shaking and like can't sit still and like doing that in an interview, are you going to want to hire that person or the person who's chill, cool, calm, collected? You can make money that way too, being calm like that. I
Right.
think it's just a generational thing that we had to be grinders and we had to like kind of get into that. And I know so many people in and around my age, and I'm 41, and I say a lot of people from pretty much like 26 to 45 right now, that they all kind of thought that's the way to be, that you have to kind of get to this theoretical proverbial like position, whether it's a promotion or a raise or a certain salary level. And then once you get there, you make it. And the problem with all that stress is you're never satisfied. You always
Mm-mm.
want the next thing to then chase. So then once
Right.
you actually get to what you want, it's gone. And I use this as an example. I worked on this a good set of music, of album that was coming out a couple years ago, and I was really excited about it. And the track listing came out in like February of like we knew that this was what's going to be on stuff that I had been a part of. I was really excited. So my birthday's at the end of March. This
Mm.
happened in February, and then the album comes out in like September or November of that year. And when I knew the album's coming out, I wanted like I was just so excited for that moment. So I can't tell you truly. I have no like recollection in my mind what happened between that February and when that album came out. And it came out and it did well. It was really exciting. It was one of like a cool highlight of my life, and it was really cool for about 2 weeks. And then it was what's next.
Right.
And I look back now and I'm like, I'm so like ashamed that I like that's why I say like man, if I can help anyone like get to this faster,
Mm-mm.
because I was like ashamed of like looking back of I couldn't even enjoy that for 2 weeks.
Mm.
Like how happy of a life am I living if I can't enjoy like something I worked for years for more than 2 weeks? And then the time I wished away for it to essentially just come out. it was like I just kind of wished time away. And I think a lot of us do that, and we're chasing stuff that will never make us happy. And you find a whole lot more, and it's Eckhart Tolle talked about it with the power of now. A lot of us are stressed because of what happened to us in the past, and because of that, we're having anxiety constantly about the future, and we totally lose sight of the present. And having that out of the equation is hurting so many people, because if you're focused on the past and worried about the future, how are you doing anything right now? Your mind is just so afraid you can't even think about the now. So you can never actually enjoy what's happening. You're either going to be working off of what happened in the past, or hustling or worrying about what's going to happen in the future. So yeah, if we can get into that now and positive thought, undoing that loop, being cognizant of it, it gets you into that now centered thing where you're happy and grateful for even the bad stuff that happened to you. Everything. We got to where we are. I love to do the example of asking who would your future self. I've got a very clear idea of where I want to be in like 1 year, 5 years, 10
Right.
years. And at the every night I say at the end of the night to myself while I'm journaling or meditating, did I get closer or farther away from that person who I know I need, who I want to be? And it's a really big self check of, okay, like it lets you know I need to get better. It's not something to tear you down, but it's to kind of keep you consistent, that if you have a bad day, does that bad day circle into 7 bad days? You want to cut it at the source. So we work into these things of positive thinking of, we can do different exercises. It works with different types of brains. We all think kind of differently. So
Right.
that's the cool thing, that what I've started doing on the coaching side is, we don't have a one size fit all thing. Everything is fully customized to everyone we work with, to find
Unique.
what works for them. Because if it's not something that's fully for you or authentic to you, there's going to be parts that's just not going to work. We need it to be to the core of what we're doing. And that's how we see the thought patterns go into everything. And I'm telling you, it's some of the coolest stuff that we're seeing of people being able to change and do things they never thought imaginable, just because instead of succumbing to that fear, when there's some opportunity in front of us, and then we get that internal, like we get really excited for a little bit, we maybe start telling our friends and family like, hey, like this might be happening, or this is happening. And then that night we go lay down, and then it's sometimes it even gets you through that night, but between that night and the next morning you start getting that negative loop of, man, what happened this if this fails?
Right.
That would be good. And then you start running like, I always fail, or like this never works out. And that, like, that essentially what it is. And that's the negative loop I like to say, where people start coming back to, this is what we can rewire. We can have it that when you get to those thoughts of panic, you find a way to get a little bit calm, and you ask yourself the better questions of, what happens when this all works out? How great
Mhm.
is this going to be when we tell this story 10 years ago, when this company had this problem? We could have failed. We could have gotten scared and run away. But no, we figured out how do we fix it, and now it's a story we're telling 10 years later. And it's, how can you find that and use it for good? It happens. Life happens for us, not to us.
Right. There is something you mentioned that actually really caught my attention. And that was, many times we make decision today because of the anxiety from the past, the experience we've had from the past, and we're afraid of this happening in the future. Come to think of it, a little child who has not experienced the world in any way, shape, or form has no fear, no anxiety. He goes around, play around, does whatever he wants without no fear. He doesn't know any limit. He just try crazy things, and he's even surprised that, oh, I can actually do this, and he continued to do it. But then you look at this kid. Now I'll use this as an example. There was a kid I met a couple of years ago. He was still a very young kid when I met him. This kid was bold, confident, smart. And then I saw this kid about 4 years later. I couldn't even tell him a couple of words, just few questions, and he was shaking. I'm like, boy, what happened to you?
Hmm.
What happened to that bold, confident kid I saw 4 years ago? So,
Hmm.
judging the past, judging the present and future with past experience. And the
Yeah.
reality is that the only way you can actually change the future is by changing what you do today. Because
Hmm.
what you do today is actually what produces what the future is going to look like. Hence,
Hmm.
the present, you know. And the idea of work hard, otherwise you're going to fail, you're going to remain poor. It is indeed true that we should work, because the Bible itself says there's no food for a lazy man, you know. The Lord will bless the work of your hand. You got to be doing something. But I feel like it has been misconceptualized in the world of today. There was a day I sat down and I was actually analyzing the analogy of working hard, working hard, working hard. I look at a lot of people in Africa. I look at a lot of people, a lot of old women, specifically in Nigeria, another part of the country. I'm like, if indeed true that working hard brings people the life of success, these people should be multi-billionaires by every measure. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what you talk about working hard. These folks work so hard, but
Yeah, yeah. And I've
there's
got it.
no
So,
result.
so I was going to say, I've got a great example to add right onto your point there, because this is where
Right,
mine was going. So we're on the same page here.
right.
Um, Name me like, so if they are, if they work in a field or a farm or what,
Mm.
like whatever this job is, name me the billionaire who does that job. Because we know all these billionaires who own tech companies, this and that.
Right,
So if hard work does pay off to that extent, exactly what you're saying, why aren't those people, why don't we know a bunch of them as billionaires, millionaires, like super
right.
successes? That's where the struggle is. If you can see that as the of man working, like just grinding all the time, that's it's an illusory thing that does not really yield the results that we think it's going to react.
Eventually. And these are the things that freak people out. You know, these are the places where stresses get developed because you give yourself all these goals and visions and artificial goals and visions. I must achieve this and that in a day. And when you don't achieve it, you're afraid because you think you're going to die broke or you're going to die poor because you don't meet those metrics. You then start creating checklists and become a humanoid, just that you don't have a bunch of circuits and CPUs in your brain. You have an actual human functioning brain, but you're not different from
Yeah,
a humanoid at that point. And the
absolutely.
reality is like you cannot live life that way. And
Hmm.
we've come to actually realize that living life with clarity, with purpose. If you look at a lot of those billionaires, we're not disputing the fact that they actually do work hard, but there's difference between working smart and working hard.
Yes.
You know,
Hmm.
working smart is discerning, making calculated steps and decision, not just repeating the same thing over and over again, beating yourself up with no result, and you keep on doing it, and you say, it's a matter of working hard. No, calculated step, discernment, all of those other things. And I'd like you to add to it. What now, what is your own view and definition of working smart? To me, from my own standpoint, I would probably say, discernment. When
Yeah.
you can't live life, me, I anchor my faith on God. And I believe
Yeah.
that God is the author and the finisher of the world and everything. And so before I make decisions or, I discern, I would ask God, what do you want me to do in this case? And then I
Hmm.
go by the feeling that my guts, if it feels
Yeah.
right, if it aligns with my vision and my goal, I can say, maybe I do this then. And if it doesn't work, I ask God, is it the way or is it a different part? Because consistency, sometimes you have to redo things over and over and over and over again and keep showing up
Yeah.
every day before you eventually see the answer to what you're looking for. But some efforts are just purely just trying to catch the air. You can't catch it. That's why it's an air.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, sorry, what was the question again?
So the question was, what is your own definition of working smart?
Yeah.
We already talked about how just merely working so hard is not
Hmm.
actually the answer to this life of success you're trying to achieve, but it's actually
Yeah.
working smart. And
Hmm.
people might see working smart in a different light, but what does that mean to you?
So for me, especially this is the way I was able to figure it out for myself, was the stuff that made me stress. So I had a very distinct thing, and I used to say, and I call it, people taught Sunday scaries. I thought this was just a me thing. So this
Mhm.
was cool as I started talking about it, people related to it. But
Right.
Sunday scaries was the one that I got the most of people going to work after a nice long weekend. And
Mhm.
it was that hit in the stomach feeling, and that it's for whatever reason then you can't fall asleep that night because of everything that's going. So that's the anxiety bringing you down, and that's rolling that way. So that's whenever I had that feeling, I knew that I was grinding and I was into that mindset. It's when I was being able to be more creative, when I'm writing the music that I write, when I'm creating the art and creating the things business wise that I want to get, and I'm in that flow, then I know I'm working smart. So it's going to be a little different for everybody in whatever that
Right.
it is. But whatever triggers you on that end, you're feeding stress if you do that on an everyday, and that's your body's becoming normalized to it, and it's taking some type of hit. And I use the example of if you're a NFL football fan,
Mm.
that it's a guy who has a concussion, he's not 100% the next time. Or if he has a knee injury, it's not 100% again. And now you're like at 95% as your most. So if you have things that stress you out so much that you end up hurting or damaging your stomach or your heart, then you're into the mode
Understandable.
of good catch there. Then you're in that mode that you're just kind of stuck into that frame of thinking.
Mm.
So it's a way to balance and counteract on it. But I also like to say visualize of how things are going to go. Try
Mhm.
to, when you meditate or you pray, ask God for that discernment. You start visualizing what happens if it goes this way, and you
Mhm.
see how that life's going to be. And for me, working smart is when you're visualizing and I feel like I can see everything that's going on. When I jump into a business project, if I can't see everything 360, I know I'm missing something. And I know I'm
Right.
not fully in tune and into that frequency of what those people are working of. So
Right.
I like to fill in the gaps and ask those questions. And that's what we've got to do for ourselves of, why do I think the negative thoughts? How can I
Right.
switch that to the positive? And we do that in every, like I say, you could do it in work, you could do it in your
Mhm.
personal life. But as you realize and you can catch those thoughts, it's not a like a doomed program. Your thing is on an auto scroll right now. But
Right.
once you stop and like realize, okay, I can catch that, when you realize maybe you had a negative emotion for about 24 hours, I've been able to say something that used to bother me for a day or two a week, that something happens in my day and then that day's ruined or that week is ruined. I've got that down to like 5 minutes now. I trust me, I still get angry. It's fine to get angry. It's fine to
Right.
react. That's our body's natural way of doing whatever. But it's how fast can I get back to calm? And it's same in that grind and that work smart future of, when I know I'm cool, calm, and collected, I'm making my best decisions. I want to
Mhm.
make all my decisions from there. And I know I make, and this is like the funny paradox of it, of on the negative side of, when we're angry or stressed or have anxiety, for some reason we make some of our biggest decisions in life when we're in those states. And
That's
we
true.
make the worst decisions. I always say,
100%.
name the three best things that happened to you when you were stressed, or like best decisions you made. But I'm
None.
like, but I bet I could tell you the negative side of, I
Oh
bet you the
yeah.
text you didn't want to say or the word you didn't want to say. And it's just, how can we limit that? And it's just being able to acknowledge, hey, we're all human. We all react and we're all going to have a feeling like that. It's fine to react, get it out. And I tell people, the people around me who love me, I'm like, hey, when I get angry, especially with my ADHD,
Mhm.
I start spouting nonsense. And it really has like no tie to me, but it's like, I guess it's whatever was on my, like that
Mhm.
running random thoughts in my head. I'm on hyperdrive with the ADHD. And I'm like, man, I was like, I can tell you, I was like, I've written down those thoughts. Like I told you that exercise I did before, a
Right.
bunch of my thoughts are just like, I say throughout the day, I'm like, whoa, I was like, why did I even think of that? I was like, that's a random thought. And it's just, we don't have to let our life be dictated by those. We can catch it and just be like, okay, that's nothing. It's just is what it is. And you move on from there. So it's finding that pattern of what works for you. And the more you can kind of slide into it, you can realize really quickly what's working hard and what's working smart. Trust the feeling, trust your instincts and your intuition, and roll with that.
100%. If there's one final principle that you can give to someone on the other side now to deal with anxiety, fear, and to transform these negative thoughts and patterns that's probably ruining their lives, and they are at this point exhausted and tired of it and want to get rid of it, what would be that principle or that final advice?
Yeah. Is to actually say it out loud, write it down, whatever that stress is, and start thinking, how could it potentially go right? So this is just like I look at it as a free choice, that why wouldn't you make this? We can anticipate that everything's going to go wrong. And
Right.
trust me, sometimes things will fail and sometimes things will go wrong. So I'm not saying that just by thinking positive, you're changing everything. What I am saying is, by changing your pattern, I can tell you, whenever we've worked on something, say you're working on a puzzle, or you're working on anything, and there's kind of something missing, a piece missing of whatever's going on. If you stress and you're just trying to, it's literally like that whole round peg in a square hole type thing. Like, you're trying to jam it in, it's not going to work when you're into that mode. But so many times when we think we can't figure something out, and there's that phrase, sleep on it. And then the next morning, you start thinking about it in a more logical way. So the way we can trigger that in advance is that we can start saying, what happens if this works out right? We're already stressed about it going wrong. We've already
Right.
calculated that and figured, like, we think that's going to happen to some extent, the way we're kind of baking that into the equation. So give the other side of it. How great could this be? Man, this problem, I made a mistake at work. I'm afraid to kind of own up to it because I think I'm going to get in trouble if I say it. But they, for whatever reason, you do own up to it, and you, like, I always say, what could go right? I'm like, maybe you have a manager who values initiative and values someone who can take accountability for when they make a mistake. I know I'm a manager, and I hire people, like, I appreciate that. I always say, tell me if you made a mistake and we can fix it together. Don't
Right.
hide the mistake and then I have to answer it later and I have no idea what your rationale was. So if we go with that mindset, like, there's so much, if we can really just say, how could this go right, and think about the possibilities of that, because then your brain can then make the discernment or the intuition call of,
Hmm.
I'm stressed about this side, man, I want to fight for this side because I at least have to fight. If we're already defeated and we think the negative is going to happen, we already have one foot out the door. So
Right.
I always say at that point, it's almost like, what else do you have to lose? You might as well at least try to think positive and see if there's at least something better that you're going to get out of your situation.
Thank you, David. That is
You got it.
fantabulous. That is great.
Thank you.
Here you have it, guys. When next time when your mind is going through that negative loop and your brain is going haywire, just repeat it. Speak out what you're saying, what is going on in your head. Write it down. Ask yourself, is it even true? And how could you see the positive side of it? What could possibly go right? Not just only what could go wrong, what could actually go right. I bet you might even have a million reasons of what could go right and why this gonna work. And that lead to maybe two or three reasons that your mind is telling you is gonna go wrong is what is freaking you out. So say it out, write it down. And if you like, if you're in the stage like I was and I was about to freeze, just remind yourself that you've done it before, you're going to do it again. And even if the last time wasn't great, that does not determine your future. Your decision to change the future start from what you do now, which is staying present, staying calm, and understanding that the negativity is not actually the reality. The reality is a decision you make that moment. So you can choose to be calm. So that is it, guys. If you have enjoyed this conversation, which I have, I want you to subscribe, hit the notification button, like this video, and share it out there with someone there that they too can transform their life from this valuable discussion that we have had here. And if you have any question or any testimony, you can reach us to us as proverbialminds@gmail.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram. And until the next one, guys, stay blessed, stay positive, stay calm, and stay energetic. Peace out.